Hello, welcome everybody to Process Group meeting. And today, 25th May, we are gonna look into a couple of things. As you can see, I still continue using the whiteboard. There are some updates we did. I messed up these arrows previously. I realized that I'm not when I should move them to also the new board and copy paste it to the previous board in order to make these arrows to lead to the right places. I'm gonna show you how it works, because the goal here is to connect all these tasks into agenda items. So previously you noticed I was also adding this kind of information but now I'm fully keeping them as basically task titles. And if there is a context to be discussed, like let's say we take one action item, we pull it to the, like here we have academic research. If you click on it, it will take you to the topic which was already expanded. And then if the topic continues to be expanded, then these arrows will be navigating to the correct sections so that we can start building the network of transportation around these sticky boards across the board in order to follow and less duplication of these tasks themselves. On the right side, and yeah, regarding these tasks, looks like the way we are organizing it, we're not going to do much of work in these calls ourselves, and process code will be more of mother code to push out more work groups. Like if we want to have teamwork activities, create a teamwork workplace. When we want to talk about academic research, we can give the like pitches in process code, but the actual work and meetups will happen in a different space. And here it's to have more of the higher view on these tasks. And yeah, so we do have two action items, because every time I'm taking these informations and tasks from the Discord channel itself. So if you have anything to share, just drop either a link which leads to a topic, or push agenda or share agenda in the Discord channel, and I will take it to the process code. And same for the treasury code topics.
But by the way, Chivo, I just wanted to mention that we're planning to do like a 5 to 10 minutes demo for Summon platform. Perhaps it could be by the end of the meeting or something like that.
Well, one thing you mentioned is like this is a task and like upcoming task. What you can do is you can create a video demo and upload it, and then it's basically done.
No, the demo is actual voting from the ambassadors, so it's not just showing how it works, because I believe most people can figure out how it works. We can still do a demo if it's needed, but we would like to do like a live vote. I created like a poll, and each ambassador here has like an NFT in their wallet, and we can do like a vote there.
Right, we'll keep that in mind. Today we don't really have that much time, but we could alternatively change stuff up. Okay, let's touch the agenda items we have in, and then let's keep in mind to have the live vote demo, or alternatively prepare to have that in appropriate time. Two of the action items that were discussed were these are green ones, so they are already completed. So it's more of an just for everybody to know. Ambassador Zoom account has now all the work groups scheduled in its Zoom account. And with this, we also, Felix attached the read.ai, as you can see, and he put some guides on top of here. So I also pulled them on this Miro board for reference. In future, because the way I almost visualize it is, I see that Stephen Kuadao is starting from a very past to also bring into archival information from the Miro board, so then we can be more assured that also these guides will be reflected and activated. Right now, I'm not sure are these activities recorded, and I hope Felix does it somehow. Other than that, they are just going to be seen as done activities. And another discussion I will want to bring our attention is to the process called task audit. I'm not sure. Describe how an example how to become ambassador. Yeah, so we had several weeks ago a task. Describe how you became ambassador. What did you do? What would you like to do in 6 months? And what is your relevance to Singularity as an ambassador? And with the recent Treasury Quilt discussions, we brought up a new question: do we remove AGX rewards from this task because they are ambassadors, or do we still reward these kinds of questions to the ambassadors, or we just consider it part of their work, so to say? And if it's part of the work, should we then somehow emphasize other ambassadors to also answer that? Because now we have this same incentive issue. So anybody have thoughts here?
I do have. In my mind, this would then be the double dipping. We don't allow for ambassador roles. I mean,
Yeah, I don't think ambassadors should get rewarded for a task like that. I think, yeah, perhaps this is just throwing a spanner in the works, but for me, the more pressing question is like, how do we engage or reward the people who aren't ambassadors right now? But yeah, this is separate, I guess. But I don't think there should be double dipping on stuff like this.
I agree with you, Fly. I thought the reward was just for Mikasa for doing the collection and editing of the data. I didn't think it was for the ambassadors.
That's a totally different task, in my opinion. It looks like there was a duplicate, different versions. The Mikasa version had a lot of other questions too, and this was like created long time ago before there was any ruling of double dipping, like 6th April, a start of month. And this task was created. So, okay, so we remove the rewards, and if nobody objects, we stated it.
Let me just ask you quickly. You said this was done before the rule was in place. Does that mean it was done before the rewards for ambassadors were there? And would this then be considered back pay before those rules were put in? Because if it was before that, I think you guys should get paid.
I think it was a very same time, just before the strategy quilt had more clarity on that. Also, but then again, it is very aligned with that, and to me, we did get rewarded in some sense retrospectively. So it's like double dipping retrospective rewards.
Okay, then I would say then take the reward away.
Okay. Yeah, also most of us filled it like lately, so I think it would count as double dipping. Yeah.
Then other action here is task was for ambassadors, but other people also answered them. Like Ivakanda shared I'm a good teacher, I really want to create Indonesian community, I bring them to have access. So people are giving insights, Corgo is sharing something, and even though it was clearly mentioned that this is an ambassador task, and it was mentioned that we do not reward other members, do we now reconsider due to changes of our treasury system? Or we stay to the cause of what task was mentioned for?
On some level, I think we should like go where the water flows. If this is a task that community are engaging with and they've got some good information that we can post something, I think they should be rewarded.
He describes I took steps to become a Singularity ambassador by attending available events. Currently, I participate in 2 ambassador events, naming Zoom calls.
It could be like those texts are there, and if Mikasa wants to use them or if someone wants to use them, then they're rewarded. That's another option. But I understand it's like stating that there isn't any rewards and this is only for these people, but then those other people kind of contribute on some level. We don't want to reward people like not following the basic instructions. But yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so I will, based on this sense, I will add the other members who did share their perspective. And when we talk about rewards, we do still allow gimbals for everybody, even ambassadors, right? It's because that's time tracking, basically. Yeah.
It
Then
also seems to be confusing about ambassadors. Like we are these 7 ambassadors, but on some level, everyone in this community is an ambassador, and perhaps there is a confusion here that we can help iron out.
yeah, well, only those who have ambassador role. Yeah, okay. The 2.
Now, Tavo, I answered directly to Mikasa. I was DM'd, so I did not do it through DWork, so my answer won't show up. I don't want to be rewarded at all, unless Mikasa added it in here. I think the question, though, comes from those of us that have the ambassador role. And that to me is pretty straightforward. Only those that have the ambassador role will be rewarded. So the first question is moot for anybody that answered it that doesn't have the ambassador role, because they did not become an ambassador. So I don't see rewarding people just because they answered a question when it's outside the sandbox, so to speak. Just my viewpoint.
I'm gonna take it back. And if there is differences in our discussion, I will go with the version that we started with. Okay, and now final, which guild task should it be moved? Is it a strategy guild or marketing guild? Because it came out in an idea of a vision, because it was related to onboarding, and then it's like, well, we don't really have to think too deeply how to get on board, and let's just ask ambassadors how did they get to be ambassador, and that could have been that user story, or which could be used to create that onboarding. But otherwise, and what Mikasa is also doing, it is content. It could be used as marketing material, like what do ambassadors do, and that kind of creates distraction elsewhere. So any thoughts which DWork task it should be rewarded? Because right now we don't have the capability to put tasks under multiple guilds.
You're talking about Mikasa's task where she's asking the ambassador questions, right?
This same thing, the question for ambassadors, but not the Mikasa task. That's the precursor one. Describe how you became ambassador. What would you like to do in 6 months? And what is your relevance to Singularity and ambassador? That was created on the process guild, but now we have strategy, and now it's kind of getting completed. So where should we move it, if at all? Or we just keep it in our process group because it was created here first?
It's a good question. It's a good question for future use case, since this doesn't really have rewards. It doesn't have, too much implication. I would think in the future for marketing guild, it seems like there's 2 work groups, and they'll be basically deciding what writers will be doing, what videos will be doing, and eventually, hopefully, there's a graphics work group.
Would it be a useful material for writers work group then? Like, because this is an content, like there is a lot of information to be taken from. Like,
That's true.
This is unique material which you don't really find just Googling.
Tivo, I have a question. Like, what was the purpose of this task? Perhaps that can help us categorize it.
As I mentioned, it started off based on, well, we need onboarding, and that was a good question to start with, to get user stories. How do you get onboarded to be an ambassador? And it was aligned with strategy guild vision setting. And this was these early incubation days, I think just before the first incubation meetings, or just after that. So, but now, as it's completed, it's more like, well, it's content and it's marketing material.
I mean, perhaps we can keep it up as we started with, and it could be used as a content as well. Because I think the way how we should categorize this task is by the initial thought. If they're going to be used even in a dozen work group afterwards, that doesn't really matter. I mean, again, there is reuse cases for so many stuff. You can take something from education, use it for content, and then use it for strategy, and it can keep going like that. But we should focus on the first thing, which is the purpose why it was created.
So I keep it under process guild, which is not even the strategy one, because it was created here first.
I would like to hear from our resident archivist, Stephen.
Yeah, I was going to mention outputs, and particularly the Ambassadors Guild Gitbook started by Peter, which should be a kind of source of truth. So I think, Peter, you framed it originally as a summary of each guild. I mean, I know that's out of date, a few months out of date, but hopefully if content is being produced, I think there needs to be a view of what is kind of agreed content, if you like, if you're summarizing ambassadors' roles or work groups, what's been agreed and can go out there into the world and say, this is what Process Guild does, this is what Treasury Guild does, this is what Marketing Guild does, in the form of like a paragraph summary in the Gitbook, in the Ambassadors Gitbook, I mean. And that's what I mean, is that there'll be kind of like a conservative content. There'll be content which we don't change very much, you see what I mean, that will be informative, but it needs to be a kind of definitive statement on what that thing is. You see what I mean? So if we can have some sort of workflow where, yes, content could be used for marketing, yes, content could be used for other articles, but there's also, what is Marketing Guild? Where do I go on the Gitbook to get that information?
Well, I think it makes sense to have it at some point, have it at that stage, but right now it's not, clearly. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit tricky in a way. I would say let's get that defined and let's get that sorted, and it will obviously change a little bit over time, but we can amend, of course. But yeah, at the same time, I'm not sure for like on a practical level if that should be something to focus on.
So I'm gonna create a quick mirror board voting. 2 votes, practically 1 minute too soon. Most of you know the drill. Yeah, everybody has done it, so I'm gonna just start it, but still go over it. So when you join the mirror board, and perhaps you need a mirror blank, sure. And if you join mirror board, it should pop up this session, join voting, and then you have 3 options to vote on. Oh, 4. Either somewhere else, process guild, marketing guild, strategy guild. You have 2 votes, and you can select up to 2 stickies with that, and only 1 vote per sticky. And then just let's create a heat map and see if our collective decision making will give us quick resolve here.
So what is the question, Tiva?
Which guild task well, where should this task to be moved?
For me, it seems like quite a small question. I don't know whether it like has larger implications, but I'm just like, I don't mind so much.
Yeah, I agree. I guess for future implications, you know, if somebody wants to make a task for some guild or work group, I would hope that they're like a part of that guild or work group, or gets some consensus from that guild or work group, especially if like funds are used out of like their allocation.
Yeah, like how we're saying to Bart about doing like future graphics, is he has to get the go ahead if he wants to do graphics from, say, a lead of each work group who he's making it for, and kind of on that basis get consensus, and not to just come to make things in marketing for all these other things without prior approval. I mean, I think that's proven quite necessary in marketing to have kind of prior approval process, or at least stipulate between how we reward with that.
Tevo, is this just in your mind a budget question for Process Guild, since Process Guild started this D-work task?
It will be related to budgets too, because in the end we're gonna get graphics, and if we just gonna do tasks wherever, our graphics will not reflect what we do, because we don't really adhere to some logic. And this discussion, because now Read AI is also working on it, and hopefully we get some quick resolves in future to kind of where does it belong to, and we can have some reflection to these meetings we're having right now. So,
I still don't understand the question, Tiva.
I think there's a duplication of effort, Stephen. There's a D-work project that came out of Process, which is what we're talking about right now. And then out of Strategy Guild came a bigger question of onboarding. And from that, Mikasa picked up a project from, I don't know if it's writers or marketing, but picked up a project to interview the ambassadors. So there's going to be a payout on that. So I think we're conflating 2 different topics, 2 different issues here.
Is it about categories then, Tommy? Is it about what category should this task be under?
That's why I asked Tevo if it was just a budget question. So it's, it's the task. Yeah.
This task, describe how you became ambassador, which guild should it be moved to based on its content? Is it strategy guild? Is it marketing guild, process guild, or somewhere actually?
So which guild should own it?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think since the second came out of strategy and it's a bigger issue, which is now part of what Steven's working on and everything else, I think strategy should own it. But even though Process put out this initial one, and as I said, I don't think the ambassadors should get paid out of this initial one or the secondary one, because it would be double dipping. But the whole onboarding process, I believe at this point is stemmed out of strategy. though it's now created another guild or two, it seems, or working group, being educational and the one Stephen, whatever that turns into. So I don't, as strategy, I think it should be strategy personally, even though I didn't understand the question and I voted wrong.
Okay, you voted wrong. Then, based on the small heat map, let's move with the strategy grid, because there was a lot of also that kind of idea that does it really matter? Sometimes these small, minute things will have a very big impact in future. But to keep it short, let's then move it to strategy grid. I'm gonna keep it purple so that I remember to do that in asynchronous time. And that's that. Then one topic also we wanted to bring up in this kind of session was from a summit. So who were not able to see Tor Garbash invitation, I added a timestamped video. I highly recommend looking his presentation, because this is a god amongst people who is working on decentralized innovation funds. And he has given a lot of insight in his presentation. And one of the things he brought up, and which I took screenshot, was a discussion about what makes a good innovation fund. And to me, it was like, it's not even about the innovation fund. To me, it's like, what makes a good guild? And like, do we have, because these are good categories to look at, like, do we have repetition established? Do we do predictable funding at the start? Not really. Now, maybe. Do we gather often? Or are we decentralized in a way that we can manage our rewards? Or we like central person somewhere just dictating, adding stuff? Or is it somewhere in between? And going through all of these elements, I would like to do some kind of analysis right now synchronously. So in a way that everybody who is capable joining to the motherboard and answering this. So, but in order to do that, we have now two options. One, I created this color mapping of 1 to 7, where first two are like, we haven't really started with this kind of connection or meaning, or like this topic. You can see the questions on the left side. And the bigger the score gets, the better it is. But I created also a number 7, which is actually a bad one, that we are making it too complicated. So repetition 1 to 5, but in 7 would be then too much repetition. Like, can we slow down? Predictable funding, like very good, or going overboard, like too gamifiable. You kind of can see to how to abuse the system. Do we gather often? And also option to we gather way too often. I don't even have time to work. And so keep that in mind as a scoring option. So we don't really find the average here. We basically build ourselves a sentiment analysis with this scoring. And there are two options here. One is that we explore each question, and we basically take the colored version and we give our reason why we chose this color. And another, if we want to do it, which is much more simpler. So exploring question we should do anyway. But the way we kind of vote is we could have what we just did on this small exercise, that we select our stickies for each of these questions, and then we get the heat map from all the people where they think they're lying. Or we can create it not motherboard voting. We will not get results right away, but we basically create the qualitative tokenomics voting. So how to do that would be that we create sticky notes with our reasoning, and we put our name in front of the sticky, and then I will, in the meantime, like for the next week, I will share what happens if we apply Kimball token weights on these decisions and see if there are any differences of the people who are more engaged in different sections or different guilds. Would how does that like change the votings? So a bit of a long intro.
Can you speak to, sorry, yeah, can you speak to the question of what is a growth? Someone asked in chat, is Tommy, wasn't it, actually? So.
Establish a growth path. For me, it means a roadmap to know how much you can basically onboard people and where the kind of so basically agreement that we are going to onboard X amount of people, or we're going to make this open, and we're not going to have that many roles and only this role and that role and maybe here. So basically, yeah, managing our scalability of humans in our circles.
I think it might be it's really nice the second way you described, to get like the qualitative and compare it with the gimbals and stuff, but in the rest of this session, I think it may be too short to like go through all our different reasonings if we want to aggregate it and get a kind of heat map during this session. But one thing we could do is, if we wanted to do a vote, we could turn the 1 to 7 and put it as a key at the top, then put each people's name as a column, and then we just post in our what we think, and then we just look from that, perhaps.
Yeah, the both. So the differences with these voting solutions is that with simple voting, I basically will copy paste to all of these, and then we get the simple the version right on this call. With the second option, we still somewhat get the feeling, but every person on this Mara board will take like, okay, how well are repetition organized? I think this, and then he puts his name, Pevo, and answers the reason why he thinks like, because this. And everybody does that, but we get to see color coding. We somewhat can aggregate this together, but the tokenomic application to analyze it further will the results will come next week. So this is not something I was able to do quickly this last week, and actually.
Can you explain again the link with the gimbals?
So I'm gonna basically every person has every task what is recorded on the work has these tags: community communication, content creation, and they are also all tasks are related to programs or guilds. So these are all the gimbals. So every person has allocated gimbals, which is has a relation with task, skill, or guild, or a work group. And what we can do in here, I have no clue actually how it will look like, but my assumption is that we may see some relations that perhaps Process Guild will put lower numbers on this because they have different like perspective, but marketing may put some like different versions. So, or perhaps people who do more content creation have different scoring for this, or like people who only participate but not really contribute have different perspectives. So we were able to see a little more nuanced voting, which may still not be as relevant, and we may not see that many differences, but we don't know because we don't know what we don't know. And that's all my assumptions right now, what we may see from that tokenomics voting.
Chivo, small comment on the gimbal using. So some of us, including myself, you, and perhaps Felix as well, were involved in or are involved in Swarm, which means we had some gimbal tokens from the swarm side. How can we differentiate the ones obtained from Singularity and the others?
All rewards are related to the group you belong to. So Singularity Net is its own group, and that's why we use the treasury system, which is everything is already recorded in relation to guilds, groups, subgroups, and tasks and labels, basically.
So you're actually gonna do this. So you're not gonna simply do the weight by gimbal token, but you're gonna look at the sheet and then like basically join up the columns and stuff like that, right?
Yes.
Okay, I see. Makes sense.
Literally
Yeah.
a little bit like a test run for the, let's say, native token for the guilds, actually. Then.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. It does bring up the question about like a bit related to also what's going on in deep funding with like reputation systems and linking to wallets and I think yeah, I don't like the idea that it's like this person has this opinion and then it's linked to these amount of tokens and link it in this way. But I think like to frame the information in terms of these different like outputs and like guilds and eventually like with these skill sets, I think is a really smart move to kind of make some progress on this.
Yeah, on the reputation building, Tavo, Felix, Rojo, myself, you probably have some base understanding, Peter, mayhaps. I don't think anybody else in the ecosystem understands what the purpose of gimbals are. And as we're talking about Felix's small cellular organizations, we may want to totally rethink that. And as we say, as someone just said, Fly, I think with Guild, start our own tokens, our own reputation system. So I would say right now, if you ask me to vote on that, I would have to say the borrowed system for Cardano is well established, well known, but the Swarm has not even started or organized reputation building other than in deep funding.
We started in Catalyst before we started in deep funding. 1 year before deep funding, actually.
The D-work tasks are reputation building, and the gimbals were a means to record time spent at that. That was basically our decision how we will use them.
No, I understand. That's why I said I understand. I think you and Felix, I don't know how many other people understand that or understand what the system is and how it builds the reputation.
This I would say fairly nobody knows. Everybody's looking on already trying to get together the data which you need to build any reputational meritocratic systems, but how they exactly work with the weight, for example, and all the stuff. This I would think it's fair to say nobody really knows. And this is our collective challenge and journey to figure out.
But the way I understood it, the main aim is to at least track stuff, and then later on, when there's a proper system, you have that data as input.
Exactly. It's a little bit like Cogito. They introduced that token like a tracer token, right? The first real Kalam tracer token. Cool. It's exactly what we did with the Jimmy token for the one last time here. It's actually a tracer token, right? A token which you can add to engagement.task on whatever platform, in our case, Evo, and to have a token linked to it, which allows you to bring the engagement on chain in the storage. And once you build up the on-chain storage, then you can start to build on your meritocration or reputation systems or whatever on top of it.
we are technically not in hurry to do this tokenomics voting, and we can postpone it because we will have more opportunities to do better decision making. And then because here it was a bit more complex once I set it up, and it would be, if you're just interested to see how, and actually now I realized it's on a context here, process coiled ambassador program analysis. So this process coiled, we look into how well is this process coiled repetition organized, how predictable is funding here. And if we do it the simple way, then it's much simpler for also the other guilds to repeat that process if they, or work groups, if they are interested and they feel like, oh, we have established a lot of ground. Let's get the basically overview of where we are, and then we can continue. Because I also keep winding time, but that was a good segue.
Yeah, I just want to say that there are, to sort of prevent reinventing the wheel, there are standards bodies for tokenomics. There is also the blockchain maturity model, which I think Dor may have derived some of this from in terms of the levels of maturity of a blockchain or blockchain voting. So I'm not saying we should copy that, or, you know, but it's just to be aware that there is already a context like the Interwork of Token Alliance, for example. So I would recommend referring to that if you're doing any token development.
We already have a token. The goal here is to analyze what we are.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Is the data we are collecting, is it useful for voting weights?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm suggesting that you refer to as part of the process, refer to work done by international standards bodies on whether this is a good process or not. I mean, I hear what you say. I hear what you're saying. We have done tokenomics. Yeah, of course, I get that. But there is, I mean, the thing that comes to mind straight away is the Interwork Alliance and the token taxonomy framework as well. If we're not aware of this, then you're not aware of, you know, I'm not saying we should copy that, but you need to be aware of those standards, those industry standards. So,
who says that something is a standard? I challenge the Stephen. Come on. Sorry, Flair.
No, I agree, Felix. I'm not saying we should copy it. It's just good to be aware of it. That's all. You know, so.
Yeah. Well, if we go to a real life example, Tavo, of the one ambassador.
Can I just say what I was going to say to Stephen before we go back to Tivo? That
I have nothing else to say.
Just that Stephen, this is a question that I would love to know for taking forward with the archive group. Just sorry, Tommy, to jump in. I just wanted to put a ping on that because I think that's a great thing to work towards.
Well, I mean, yeah, I suppose I'm always looking at things from a quality assurance angle. So I see where Felix is coming from. There's a kind of balance between oversight and looking at what lessons you can learn from industry standards, and then also, as Felix might put it, saying fuck off and doing our own thing. You know, and to a certain extent, we want to be creative. I get that, yeah. And this is like a new thing, and we're experimenting, but it's also it's just clever to see what other people have done. You know, like, for example, maturity standards, you know, and the token taxonomy framework, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the link you shared, the Voltaire principles, would that be one way to cross-check if the results of these tokenomics are useful?
No, the Voltaire principles are background to Dor's approach. So Dor drafted the Voltaire principles, but that was like a year before the decentralization summit. So he's obviously learned some lessons from there, because there's similarities between the volunteer principles and those things that he's listed out there. I can see them straight away, but his thinking is obviously advanced on from that. So it's more contextual. When you go across from 1 to 7, looking at that I can see he might be looking at maturity levels, you know, which are is not, yeah. So
these numbers are stuff I made up just to make this
all right, okay, well
experiment fun.
That's what I'm saying. Well, that's what came to mind. If you come up with a set of principles, and then you want to test those principles to see where have you got to, there are already structures that do that, you know, so which are like maturity levels or taxonomies. That's what I'm saying.
Sensing the room, we will discard the tokenomics ways, but then we still get the heat map. When we go over these questions, how well are our repetition organized? Does everybody have a clear understanding of that? And I'm gonna put now random people into the into a position to answer those questions, like what does this question mean? And I'm gonna start from left, which is Rojo. How do you understand this question? What does it mean? How well are our repetition organized?
I guess that would refer to the internal structure on basically having like well-defined processes on how to do things, so that not every single thing has to be brought up for conversation again and again. So just well-defined, and we have to do this every single week or every single month or whatever.
I would add here the idea that because it was pulled from the Innovation Fund experiment, and that the idea is that repetition has to happen, like to have these cycles of repeating same activities again. So to say, like, when we have a process called every 1 month we do retrospective, for example. Right now we don't do at all, I think. Well, we do, but we don't have the repetition cycle. So nobody has that kind of heartbeat in this. And that's the way I understand that question. Repeated experiments.
Should we go round everyone, or is there not enough time for that? Or
probably not time for that, but if like very obvious stuff, I would actually remove reduced redundancy, because it
Yeah, like, that's my understanding. Like repetition doesn't it maybe isn't very effective. It's just repetitive, but the effectiveness is kind of different. So yeah.
The next question: how predictable currently is our funding in process code? This group.
Well, at this time, to what extent can we? I'm just rewording it. To what extent can we predict longevity of funding for the processes in Process Guild?
I'd say, especially compared to Catalyst, definitely how well is engagement ensured. Because for example, with Catalyst now, since a half a year of pause, everything is, lots of things are dying off, and there's no insurance at all anymore. After 9 constant funding rounds, where a lot of beautiful things happen.
Engagement assured, yeah. The right incentives. The right incentives. Next one. Do we gather often enough? The phrase DeFi.
I think weekly meetings, yes, we gather often enough. They're repeatable, they're consistent. And I think we're going to be finding ourselves meeting more and more.
In context of process school. But yes, work groups would fall under process school too, some of them.
I would just say that's a yes. It's weekly, it's consistent.
I was just a question on understanding of the question, bro.
You did mention, are we having consistent places to collaborate, spaces to collaborate?
And I guess this is, with this, do we gather often enough? There is like, yes, we have in Process Guild the Zoom and however many people in Zoom, but then also in the Miro board. And those numbers often differ significantly. Like it's like 5 people in the Miro board now and quite a few more here.
True. For me personally, I find it easier if I was managing the camera and I could see chat as well at the same time. That's, yeah.
Well, it was taken up in one, someone said it last week about facilitating the process of people that can't be on Miro board and having someone literally plotting in what others are thinking. But then that is also
Yeah,
another
that was me.
level of facilitation. Oh yeah, cool. Hey.
Hey, I was actually just going to say also, when we think about do we gather often enough, do we need to think about in what format we gather, not just like Miro, but async versus sync, because it can be really, with all our different time zones, it can be super excluding sometimes.
Hmm.
Can you gather asynchronously?
Yeah, I think you can. Yeah.
Well, that is
Sometimes
not really gathering, I think.
I don't know. I think it is.
Sometimes you can see, even on Discord, sometimes answers coming in async, and sometimes you can see these momentums. Oh, 3-4 people are online right now, and they're giving themselves a fucking beautiful chat on Discord there, though it's not recorded, right? And it's somehow a gathering as well, I would say.
But also things like shared documents and things like that, they are, or Miro boards, they are a kind of gathering, I think.
Yes.
I mean, I suppose it, it's semantics, it's a definition thing, but I think when we're considering, do we gather often enough, maybe we need to look at whether asynchronous practices can kind of replace some of the temporal physical gathering that we do, because there's a lot of meetings and it could get overwhelming for people.
But then shouldn't we like concretely make the question more like, do we have enough meetings or do we do enough work during or outside of meetings?
Well, that's a whole other thing, isn't it? It's like, is a meeting a working meeting or a sort of getting together thing? Because, when you ask, do we gather often enough? It's like, what kind of gatherings? Do we mean work meetings like this or what else,
Yeah, I would actually like to keep that as broad, and it was amazing that you brought up like asynchronous meetings, and I think it should fall under that. And that's why we're having this context analysis of these questions to elaborate, so we have a bit of some context before we all answer those questions in our metrics. And I would include both synchronous and asynchronous way, because it's actually what you mentioned, like having gathering in document in a way that we still put our energy just at different times, and in future we may still come back to it, because we kind of learn together because we both looked at the same results.
Thibaut, this was sourced from Door, yeah? But if you look back where he may think he's, because Door referred to in the Voltaire principles on the concept of liveliness, like the liveliness of a community, okay? And that can mean a few things, like how engaged, not just how many people are engaged in a community, but how well they are engaged in the community. And as Vanessa was mentioning, you can get to a point where you have like a meeting culture can emerge, where and that can be overwhelming for some people. That's why the asynchronous thing is not just a way of doing things, it's a sign of how lively the community is, for example. So if you recall back a year or two in Catalyst when people were coming into the Discord server, it was important to greet them, you know, to answer questions. And we all know that here, you know, because that is also part of the liveliness, how we gather of our community and encouraging onboarding. So that's how I'd see it as well.
Next one, how well we have organized our reputation building? How do you understand that question, Randana?
How well have organized our reputation building? I would just say the process from start to finish, like people having an understanding what the reputation system is, what type of impact that could have.
Yeah, I feel this touches on which task gives like differences in tasks and reputation as well. Not saying there needs to be, but that's what the question suggests to me. Like in a way, if all tasks have the same reputation impact, then by definition, the reputation building is organized well, I would say.
In the chat also, I think it was Cran who said that there's issues with privacy and how that is connected. So it sort of feels like that might be an issue that needs to be included in thinking about reputation building. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of covered by, do people understand what the reputation system is and what impact it'll have, but do they also understand where they stand on privacy with it? I think would be included.
Yeah, it is interesting, and maybe not quite linked to this conversation, but people's knowledge on when you're receiving rewards or reputation and things of that nature, like just how linked and available and public your wallet is on certain chains, especially like Cardano, until tools are created to, you know, have some form of zero knowledge or anything like that. I'd hate to see a future where I have an augmented reality app and I'm walking down the street and I can tell if somebody's a good boy or a bad boy and what their whole history is on the internet. That would be quite dystopian. So I'm hoping for a reputation system within the ambassador program and SNet as a whole doesn't get too dystopian.
Maybe we can rephrase the question. How can we best build reputation models?
No, we are not going to build here. This would be, if the signal would be, well, our reputation sucks, we haven't even started, then we make a question, okay, how do we build it? And right now, these questions to me and the way I established it was more in the context of sensing what would be needed to do and where we already good enough, I would say. Sorry to push back on you.
Oh, sorry, can I just say, it feels like it kind of might be about education as well, because we're saying, do people know, whatever the situation is, do people understand? So it feels like an educational thing.
Yeah, do people understand what is reputation system? Would that be covering what you mentioned? Or that's
yeah,
different?
I think so, yeah. But just seeing in the chat the comment that Stephen's just made about contribution versus reputation, that's another thing that I think I would want to see whether people understood. And in terms of how well have we organized our reputation building, what about, have we organized a contribution approach rather than a reputational approach?
Yeah. That's a good point.
It's also a fundamental point of the protocol. So it's a big question.
So it actually, we are focusing on contribution, but this reputation was brought up, but somewhat our contribution will add up to reputation. So it is a bit of behind the education. And if we are already having questions here, then we kind of know that we are very far from using our contributions to prove outside world our reputation. But moving on, how clear is our growth pact? And Tommy, how do you understand that question?
Well, I think that we discussed this earlier and you explained it pretty succinctly. So, you know, the onboarding, the numbers, quantifying it. And I would say there should be some quality established in that also, which as you've done with the veteran translators, you've elevated it. And Kenichi's done somewhat the same with his different levels, Scribbler, etc. So I think how you explained it earlier really laid it out.
I might be here because I don't know if I understand exactly what a growth pact is fully, but is there something here about flexibility? Just, you know, from a project management of any kind of context, you often need to pivot, you often need to rethink. Is that built into your growth plan or whatever?
Also, I think Tommy instilled kind of the generally accepted knowledge that we're building the best ambassador program in the world. So that quality is definitely covered already.
Well said, my friend, well said.
And final question, have we established good environment to connect and share meaning? Stephen mentioned on previous notion that there is a liveliness in meetings and async. A Discord dialogue is also lively. Although you mentioned it as do we gather often enough, I feel like this is going down to this environment side too, and kind of having this shared meaning in the way we are doing things. But Stephen, do you have some other?
Yeah, I did frame that as a question, like, are we lively? So not that we are lively. I'm not saying we're not lively, but you know, so, and that is related to our culture, I suppose, and and yes, we are establishing a good culture. I'm not, that's the impression, but it's something to keep an eye on, I suppose.
Yeah, have we established good culture? That's a great one. All right. Good work at educating each other. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna duplicate a bunch of these numbers, and then I'm going to turn in voting. Do I trust you all, or we have to do them all separately? Can we handle motherboard voting in a way that I will give now everybody 6 votes, but you're only allowed to vote once per row?
Let's see if we can manage. If we can, it saves a lot of time. If we can't, it doesn't cost that much time.
All right. So give everybody 3 minutes, and it will give you a motherboard voting, and we have, well, for now we have 4 people on motherboard. We'll drop again motherboard link for those who already escaped the horrors of this page. Well, we now see a heat map of where we are, and clearly we have growth pact is our weakest link. And the strongest links are, do we gather often enough? And some people are still like, we barely started. So there are those who want to meet even more in process code, which could be reasonable. And yeah. And the reputation, of course, is heavily, everybody agrees here. So the most interesting thing, I guess, is to see where we align the most. It's funny that we all were able to, progress is being made in how repetitions are organized, but they are still not established, so unclear. Well, that is something to go home of. Does anybody want to share their final? Oh, well, we did have this, is Roger here, like live vote demo for Summon platform. Does anybody want to go through that too? Or shall we call it today?
I think it makes sense to go through Summon quickly.
I have a question, tongue in cheek, is how many reputational points are we getting for this?
1.5. So 150 gimbals. Actually, that's a good point. I will create a screenshot of you people because last time I forgot that and I just based off my memory try to create either task.
Just checking, you were just kidding, right? Or not?
Well, me, yeah, I was just kidding because of the conversation. I had no idea that an hour was worth 100 gimbals. I just learned something. But that's why I said it tongue in cheek after the discussion. So I am now more educated than when we started this. So thank you.
And now if we would have added tokenomics on that and naming, then we maybe would have seen that, oh, interesting, that who are those who thought it's perfect and who are those who thought it's like somewhat in barely even started situation. And then we maybe have seen like again like insight that those who are new have a different perspective for those who have been long, or maybe they are mixed. But yeah, there is a danger, like actually what Stefan said, like is this a good way, because we have a very small data set and it can be skewed quite easily. Other than
I'm sorry, I was going to say, and I think the more important question or issue here, Table, for the guild to work on is which is the most important question out of them.
Everybody gets 3 votes, 1 minute, 1 vote per sticky. And if you're on Miro board, you have now option to vote on the orange sticky note. You have 3 votes to do that. Choose your top 3 questions which are most important for Process Guild, or in general, like not even Process Guild, but in general to be answered and to be the de facto question that every guild should work on. Not because of is it the most important, like, or is it missing, but what to start with. If it was like a totally new guild, I'm actually gonna give 1 more minute because it took so much time to explain. Oh well, clear winner is environment and connection with the community. But rest of them are all over the place, I would say. And nobody cares to be gathered enough. Or not as distinctly.
This is really interesting, actually, because when you look on the first result, the only extreme which we arrived was exactly in this question, where 2 people said, oh, it's oversaturated even. By this one now, you have a validation again on it. Nobody voted it because everybody sees it's satisfied already. People only vote on the stuff which is important to them, where we see, this is not fixed yet. So having the theory then of follow-up votes actually, this feels really good. This is really good.
Can I, yeah, so I'm gonna stop recording Thanks for Aya and everybody. Thanks for watching this. If you made it so far, you're a true believer. And if you participated, you are beyond believer. And see you in the next call.